What's up, everybody? This is Ahmed with A. Roberson Photo, A. Roberson Media, with part one of a two-part Q&A of how I make my living as a freelancer and my recommended do's and don'ts. So what's up, everybody? So one of the questions that I get asked quite often, as I'm sure some of you have as well, is well, at least for my field, I am a photographer first, if you follow me. I'm a photographer first and a budding videographer. I want to be a short filmmaker. I do product photography, but I want to get into short film and film minutes, stuff like that. I find videography just as fascinating as I do with photography. But one of the questions that I get asked quite often is, when did you become a photographer, or when did you always want to become a photographer? And honestly, I became a photographer purely by chance. It was nearly 15 years ago, I want to say May-ish of 2005. I was out eating dinner with a bunch of my friends, and my buddy Craig asked me to take a picture of him and his wife, and he handed me a digital camera. And honestly, all I know is the Polaroids and the Kodak film cameras that you would pick up from the grocery store and take to a photo developer and pick them up a couple of days, 1 hour photo, a week later, whatever the case may be. So he hands me a digital camera, and I'm like, what is this? He's like, dude, it's a camera. I'm like, okay. He's like, look, you just hold the button till it focuses, you'll hear the beep, and then you just take the picture. All right. Did that, took the picture. And like I said, I'm used to Polaroids where you wait for, take the developed picture and shake it, which you're not supposed to do. And you wait for it to actually come, fully develop on the printout. Or the pictures that you put in the photo booth and wait for the film developer to get them ready for you. You go pick them up later. So anyway, I take the picture. Instantly, it shows up on the LCD. And my reaction was, whoa. Blown away, because I'd never seen that before. The next day, I went and bought a camera. Not a professional DSLR or anything like that. I started with a similar Kodak camera, a little point and shoot, but I was so fascinated that you could take a photo and see the result instantly on the LCD. And of course, I thought I was a professional right off the bat, because nobody else has a camera like this. Nobody else can do this but me, so I thought I was a pro. Started sharing my photos online, and the real pros ripped me apart. They didn't have to be so rude with it, but they were. But they ripped me apart, and me being a competitive person, but not only competitive, but a focused person, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this for fun just like everybody else who buys a camera. I'm serious about this. So I started studying really, really hard, put all my effort in. I mean, I stopped partying, stopped going out, sacrificed everything. I put all my effort into learning photography, and nearly 15 years later, here I am, full-time, 100% photographer and photo editor. So my transition into photo editing more than photography. Well, photo editing, with my photography, I tried everything. I started off doing architecture because it's easy. You don't have to deal with people. You just go take pictures of buildings, if you don't get chased off the premises for violating their privacy policies or commercial landscape rules. Sometimes you need a permit to shoot on specific privately owned businesses. I didn't know that at the time, because I thought, hey, I'm gonna just go point and shoot. Anyway, I did architectural photography. I mean, I did okay. I mean, I didn't, well, I maybe sold a couple of prints, but nothing heavy. And I did nightscape photography. I did landscape photography, ocean photography, not oceanography, but oceanscape photography. And eventually migrated to doing fashion, headshots, and parties and events, which I absolutely do not like. Doing events is not my thing, but I did it for the experience. And it was a good experience. It wasn't all bad. It just wasn't for me. Weddings, I've done a couple of weddings. Again, not all bad, but not for me. Most of the weddings I've done were for friends and family members. But I mean, it was a good experience. So anyway, after I did a years of fashion, years of headshots, and things like that, it got to the point where it's not that I don't like people, because I do. I mean, I socialize with people every day. It's part of my job. But it can be difficult at times dealing with people when they don't know what they want and they say, oh, you're a professional, make me look good. And that's not necessarily the case. Yeah, the camera might pick up all the detail in your face and your body. Some people don't want that. So then they want you to Photoshop this and change that. Well, anyway, with the invention or flooding the market of camera phones with smart filters and automatic apps, it made just being a portrait photographer a little bit more difficult. It's harder to make a sale when people are convinced that their cell phone takes just as good a picture as you do with your professional DSLR. So I thought the next best thing is to be able to enhance, airbrush, Photoshop, manipulate the photos better than any app could do, than somebody's uncle with a camera can do. So I wanted to separate myself from every other photographer, so I just started putting a lot of effort into Photoshop. And I spent years and years and years and countless hours doing Photoshop to make sure that I could get good at it, to separate myself from all the other photographers that I was competing with at the time. And then I got into product photography, because I've always, ultimately, once I started going through the landscape, seascape, nightscape, fashion, headshot, and portrait photography, I ultimately decided that I wanted to do commercial photography, product photography, which I do primarily for my living now. And I made that transition by first practicing shots of any product I could find around my house, just to see if I could do it like the pros did it. And with enough practice, once I was confident in my abilities, then I started to market myself and put myself out there as a product photographer. And by me putting myself out there as a product photographer, that allowed me to move away from portrait photography and everything else, and transition smoothly into specifically product photography. Now, sometimes I do portrait photography, but again, it has to be like family or friends or somebody close to me, but I don't market myself for that. I'm not against it, but it's just not my primary focus at the moment. So how long have I been a freelancer? Well, I've been a photographer for nearly 15 years, but as far as freelancing, 100% as my sole source of income, I've been doing that for, I'd say, maybe two and a half years or so. And initially, like most of us, wanted to be a photographer, but I worked a 9 to 5. I've never liked working a 9 to 5. And I've actually had some good ones. I've never been fired. I've always been a pretty good employee. Always got promotions, raises, the highest raise when available. And I was always there. I rarely called in sick. If I called in sick, I was really sick. And if I didn't, I was honest enough to tell my supervisor at the time I just didn't feel like coming in. But that was a rarity. I consider myself a pretty good employee. But I never liked working for anybody. I just don't like being told what to do. It's just in me. My family, my older brother, he's a career military, wanted me to join the military. And I couldn't do it. Not that I was afraid to fight, go to war, or anything like that. I just don't like being told what to do. And he would tell me it's not like that, but I'm hard-headed. I like to do my own thing. And with that, that's why I work for myself now. It's extremely difficult, more often than not. But I'd trade this difficulty rather than the easy, and I'm not saying easy disrespectfully, because I know some 9 to 5s are very difficult, but the easy life of a 9 to 5 in comparison to freelancing. I burned the candle on both ends. While I was working my 9 to 5, I would do that all day, and then at the end of the day, or sometimes during my 9 to 5, don't tell my old supervisors, but sometimes during my 9 to 5, I would still market and promote my photography, look for photography gigs. So when I got home from my 9 to 5, immediately I'd find something to eat and then jump back on the computer start honing my craft, taking practice shots. If I didn't have any clients, I'd shoot stuff around the house, just taking pictures of whatever I could, and then go Photoshop it, practice my technique, try to get better. And I was burning the candle on both ends, and it was hard, very, very hard. But that's part of the game. I mean, if being a freelancer, working from home was easy, I mean, you've heard the saying before, everybody would do it. And it's true. I mean, you know, I've told friends before, the freeways aren't crowded and full of traffic because people love going to their 9-to-5s. They almost have to, because it is easy in comparison to being a fully self-employed, financially independent freelancer. My job as a freelancer is, I mean, difficult to say the least, but the problem that I find with it is people often, well, not even often, people as a whole, all of us collectively, we love media, social interacting, social media platforms, all the things that we see, the visual stimulation of social media, but oftentimes people don't want to pay for it. You know, they say things like, oh, you do Photoshop all the time, it must be fun. Or I'll say, I love my job, it's fun to me. But fun doesn't mean free. And people don't often see that. They think, hey, you're doing it for fun. Do this for me for fun. Do this for me. It's fun. You love doing it. It's fun. I didn't know you had to equate work with misery. Just because I'm working doesn't mean I have to be miserable. I'm working, but I just love what I do. Just because I love what I do doesn't mean I shouldn't be paid for it. But oftentimes people don't see that. So, but anyway, when I was working my 9-to-5s, I didn't like it, and I would do everything I could in my power to build a portfolio, build a reputation as a good photographer, and I would market myself and promote myself as much as I possibly could. So 9-to-5 in the day, photographer by night, you know, a media superhero, you know, employed by day, self-employed by night. And I would work my butt off and continue to work my butt off as I do now, just to establish myself, build some clientele, build a reputation as a good photographer. And in my 9-to-5, I worked that 9-to-5, my last 9-to-5, I worked there nearly 12 years. And in that 12 years, I was doing my photography at the same time that I was doing my 9-to-5. In that 12-year period, it was many days that I just wanted to just walk away from the job, walk away, just start and do my own thing. You know, people often say, you know, you can't become self-employed until you make that jump, take that leap of faith. Of course, that's easier said than done. You know, if you don't have any money saved and you just dive out there, I mean, that's not a sensible risk. You know, everything that we do is a risk. You know, being a freelancer, one day I could make some money, the next day I could not make any money. And you take that risk every day, because if it dries up, you have no income, and then you have to push yourself to get back into the 9-to-5 world. Well, I don't want to go back to the 9-to-5 world, so I push myself daily to make sure that I do not have to go back to the 9-to-5 world. But I digress. During that part when I was in the 9-to-5 world, all I could think about is quitting. And my 9-to-5 was easy. It was relatively easy to me because I had experience in doing it. I dealt with electronics, and I just won't say the company or anything, but I dealt with electronics. I've been doing electronics for 25 years, so I could do it blindfolded. My job was easy, but it bothered me to be there all day when I know I could be making money doing my freelancing on my own time. My time is more important to me than money. Sounds foolish, sounds silly, because we need money to survive, we need money to eat. But I used to tell my brother and my cousin when we used to roommate, when I was just getting into my photography, that I would rather make $30,000 a year on my own than make $60,000 a year working for somebody else. Sounds foolish, but again, with me working for myself, I set my own schedule. I take the jobs that I want to take. I often forget which day of the week it is, and that's a win for me because I'm not on a programmed schedule. I don't like to feel programmed. I don't like to be on the schedule. I like to work when I want to work, go where I want to go, wake up when I want to wake, sleep when I want to sleep, do what I want to do. But the trade-off is the hard work that you have to put in being a freelancer. So to continue, I did stay at my job until it pretty much died out. It was times where I wanted to quit, but I decided let me stay there because I knew the way technology changes things that my job would become obsolete soon enough, and it did. But the reason why I stayed there is because it was in hopes of getting a severance, which I did. And that severance check sustained me for my first year after being laid off so that I could build my portfolio and seek out jobs as a freelancer so that once the severance check ran out, my sole income would be freelancing. So with that 1 year cushion, or safety net rather, that 1 year safety net of that severance check, I was able to build, market myself, put myself out there as best as possible. I marketed myself heavily on free websites. Any website available that offered free promotion for photographers of any kind, I would put myself out there. I don't care if it was a popular site or not. I just put myself out there just for the exposure. And that exposure helped when, if I'm promoting myself on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or Craigslist even, sometimes people would find me when they just do a random search for a photographer. They'd find me because of so many platforms that I put myself out there on. So, yeah, that's how I made my transition into becoming a full-time freelancer. I could have gone back into the 9-to-5 world, but when it was time for my severance check to start running out, I was nearly teary-eyed trying to make a decision on if I'm going to stay out here and keep trying to make a living on my own, or go back into the 9-to-5 world. And that was, it was a hard decision. It was a scary decision. It's still scary to this day, and it oftentimes it feels weird. And I say that because I was so programmed and so used to getting up and going to work Monday through Friday, or whatever schedule I had, Tuesday through Saturday or Wednesday through Sunday, whatever the case may be. I was so programmed to do that for the first year and a half of being self-employed, every morning I would wake up and sit on my bed for a second, feeling confused, like, what am I supposed to do? I know I'm supposed to do something, because I was so used to getting up, heading out the house, getting some breakfast, and going to work. Not saying that I don't get breakfast before I work now, but still, it was programmed as a routine when I was a 9-to-5 employee. So breaking that habit took a little getting used to. The website that I use the most to advertise my work and find work and market my work is Upwork. Upwork is the best database that I've found for high-end clients looking for high-end work. Some pay well, some don't, some are professional, some are not. There are other sites like Fiverr, Freelancer, People for Hire, and a host of others. You still have your Craigslist. You can advertise on Facebook, Instagram. I don't get that much more work from Facebook and Instagram, but initially when I first launched myself on that website, I got a lot of work there, and word of mouth is fantastic. I don't necessarily have running ads or paid or sponsored ads, but word of mouth and a lot of time on Upwork, a lot of time on Freelancer and Fiverr. I don't like them that much, but word of mouth has brought me a lot of clientele. Upwork, I'm pretty heavy with Upwork right now, and it sustains me. Another question that I receive often is about pricing. I guess we can put this into the do's and don'ts. And I say you have to learn your demographic, your clientele. You have to learn who follows you and what their affordability is. That's hard to say because not everyone is going to tell you, hey, I have X amount of dollars, take it all for my project. But you have to understand who you're serving and what their needs are. You could be the greatest photographer known to man, or film editor or photo editor, writer, any type of freelancer. You could be the best of the best in the world. But if the people looking for your services can't afford your services, being the best is nothing more than a pat on the back. Pat on the back doesn't pay your bills, doesn't feed you, doesn't give you a life. So you have to be careful of how you price your work. And that's not to say just because someone can only afford $5 worth of work that you take it. I mentioned before, you can't, every job is not necessarily for you. Some jobs you just have to turn away and walk away from. Like, I don't accept every job that's offered to me because they might not necessarily be able to afford my services. That's not to say that I'm super, super expensive, but I'm also not cheap. I'm not gonna do tons of work for $5 just because I'm good at it, just because it's easy for me. It became easy because I spent hours, countless hours, honing my craft, studying my craft over and over and over again. I didn't study to become good to do work for $5. I studied to become good so I could charge a premium based on the services that I offer. But the services that I offer justify the cost. So you want to be careful with your pricing. You don't want to price yourself out the game, so to speak. You don't want to be so good that no one can afford you. That's not going to be a benefit to you. But at the same time, you don't want to be so affordable that you're doing so much work for $5 here and here and here and here that it takes you 10, 20, 30 jobs a day just to make your daily goal, your daily quota. So my theory that I try to work, or my plan is to try to work 20-80. 20% effort, 80% reward. Doesn't always work that way, of course not. If it did, everybody would try to do it, everybody would do it. But that's my goal. Put forth 20% of the effort, reap 80% of the reward. It might be a 40-60, 40% effort, 60 reward, but ultimately, I don't want to do tons of work just to make ends meet. So I price my jobs, and the work that I accept is based on my daily cost to operate, my daily cost to live. Again, you don't want to consider yourself or think of yourself as so good to where your price is so high to where no one can afford you, and then you're out of business. You know what I mean? But conversely, at the same token, you don't want to make your prices so affordable or so cheap to where nobody respects your work. You have to find that happy medium. You have to know where your work fits according to the people you serve or your clientele. And you don't want to overcharge your clientele because you know your work is so good and so great that they're either going to pay your prices or it's not, no budgeting. No bending. Everything's negotiable. But you have to learn how to negotiate. I guess that comes with my business consulting that I try to do. I'm not the best negotiator, but I do know how to negotiate, and I'm not gonna price myself out of the game to where I'm too high to where nobody can afford me, and they say, hey man, your work is super dope, I wish I could afford you, and then they go and get somebody less expensive. But you also don't want to be so affordable to where they're like, oh, you only edit photos for $5 a photo? Hey, I've got 50 photos, and now you're spending all day working on a bunch of photos. So you don't want to do that. At least I don't. That's not my plan. Like I said, my plan is to put forth 20% of the effort, 80% of the reward. Doesn't always work that way, but that's my goal. And when you're setting your prices, be honest and upfront about your pricing with your customers, because the most difficult thing that you would ever have to do is underbid on a job and then try to talk your way up to a higher price point for that same job. So be honest, be upfront, know what your work is worth, and price accordingly. And be, try to be as fair as you can, because again, you don't want to price yourself out the game. Yes, our work, our prices, our rates are arbitrary. We can set our rates as we see fit, but you don't want to be so far apart from your closest competition that again, no one can afford you. You want to be careful in your pricing, but you do want to be clear about your pricing and upfront. And if you can, under promise but over deliver. Under promise but over deliver. That always wins my clients over. My ultimate goal when dealing with my clients is to get them to come back to me for more work. I want to be their go-to photo editor, go-to photographer, go-to videographer. I want them to come back to me all the time because I'm reliable. Customer service. Customer service is everything. Customer service is everything for my business. If you look at some of the footage that I put up with Upwork, you'll see all my 5-star ratings. 5-star ratings. It's not because they're giving me those ratings because they feel sorry for me out of charity. It's because I give them good customer service. I give them good work. And I price according to the customer service that I'm going to give them, according to the work that I'm going to deliver. Customer service is everything. You don't have to be a yes man or a yes woman and agree to everything that your client wants. The customer is always right. I don't necessarily agree with that. But your customer does help provide the living that you're trying to earn. You need your customers. You need them to come back to you. You need them to be satisfied. So one thing that I like emails with my clients. Sorry, that's my dog. I like emails with my clients. I like emails with my clients instead of talking on the phone. Not that I don't like to talk to people, not that I'm antisocial, but emails give me a paper trail so that if a client says they wanted something and I deliver that and then they change their mind and say, oh, I didn't ask for that or this, I have the emails for backup. Also, I don't like to negotiate pricing on the fly. I like to take time to think about it, think about what my client wants, think about what I can give them, and it gives me time to figure out where my price point is and then get back to them. But a good thing with my emails, I receive a lot of inquiries, can't say that word right, but I get a lot of inquiries from my clients via email. And I try to respond. If I'm awake, I respond immediately. And that's good for me, customer service, that's good for me because oftentimes my clients say, wow, I didn't expect you to respond so quickly, or thank you for responding so quickly. To me, that's normal. That's a normal practice. That's a normal business practice. But that's what keeps me in business, along with the work that I deliver, is my customer service. Again, not every customer is right, and you don't have to be a yes man or yes woman and agree to everything that your customer says or demands or asks for, but you have to be there. They're coming to you for a service. You have to provide that service. That's what you're in business for, and that's what's going to keep you in business, being there when your customer needs you. With so much to try to record and organize and edit, I forgot to record my conclusion for the first part of this Q&A and recommended do's and don'ts. So with that being said, instead of setting up my equipment all over again, I will conclude this first portion, and I will be back in the next couple of days with my recommended do's and don'ts and a couple of myths that I've encountered over my career. Okay, see you guys next time.